You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Or maybe not welcome back. Maybe this is the first time you've ever hit this podcast, in which case, welcome. But also welcome to my co-contributor for today.
Hello, Simon Day, back again to do Vertical Limits today from 2002.
I have no recollection of this movie existing except for the shot of Chris O'Donnell jumping from mountain to mountain.
I don't really have much recollection. I know I saw it. So, yeah, but I'm not sure if I saw it in the theatre. I think I might have just hired it. I'm sure for like a pound, because it's probably on the pound shelf. I had a very dodgy privately owned off license near to my house that you'd go to if you were desperate for bread or milk. And he had some very strange things in there. I think he was like an Indian guy, so he had like a lot of Indian stuff as well, Indian food. But he was trying to cover all bases, so he had like a video section, and it was videos back then. And so he'd have some really crazy kind of Indian films you'd never heard of, but then it'd also have like, yeah, Vertical Limit. And I'd probably go like, that's cheap. I'll get that.
So it's interesting to me that this came out in 2002. It's interesting because that is a full like 10 years after Cliffhanger.
Well, I think of it as a 90s action film as well, and it isn't. So I feel like it's kind of like, it feels like, I mean, I'm sure it was written in the 90s. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Cliffhanger because like I feel like they totally steal the first 10 minutes of Cliffhanger. And use it for their first 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember. I saw Cliffhanger once on VHS, and that's it. The only time I've ever seen it. And
well, before,
like,
so just before COVID hit, I had got tickets to a double bill at the Alamo Ritz, sadly gone now, of this and Cliffhanger. And I was trying to talk you into it, and you were like, "No, don't like Stallone." And I was going, go on. It's two of the best hanging off a cliff films you can ever see. And then, of course, COVID happened, and it never happened anyway. But that would have been a great double bill, I think.
So COVID really saved me from having to go see a double bill for
COVID saved you from the bullet that is Sylvester Stallone's career renaissance. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's like Stallone was the kind of A-list kind of mountain movie, and I guess a few years later they went, well, we've got Chris O'Donnell and Robin Tunney. What can we do with that? What we got? I'll raise you a Bill Paxton, because it's basically no real stars. It's a bunch of character actors, really. It's a bit like The Thing, weirdly.
Well, I mean, Chris O'Donnell at the time was
Robin.
Well, they were really like as I think Shia LaBeouf is the last one of these I can maybe point to, maybe Jesse Eisenberg, but
yeah,
like actors that nobody was really asking to become A-list stars, like hadn't really necessarily.
Who's that dude who was John Carter of Mars? Who they really try to push him?
Taylor Kitsch.
And I feel like even he didn't want to be a Stuff.
I think he would. I don't know, but but yeah, there was this thing Hollywood does or did where they would decide someone had been in a successful movie, ergo that person is now going to be the star we now push,
Yeah.
and it would be someone inexplicable like Shia LaBeouf, who,
Josh Hartnett. That's another one.
of like we didn't agree to this. Like this person is not. It has like some box office draw, I suppose, but when you're coming out of the star system of the 90s, like thinking you're going to hang your star on Chris O'Donnell was kind of a weird thing. And like, Entertainment Tonight and all these other shows here in the States were just like Chris O'Donnell. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's he ain't exactly Harrison Ford.
I remember for a while he was very hot. Like he did a John Grisham, and he was obviously Robin in a couple of Batmans, and they had him in a couple of dodgy romantic comedies. I think one where he could have sex or something before he was married, and everybody kept trying to have sex with him.
Yeah,
And
it's a full Buster Keaton movie.
yeah, and it's like, and I guess this was like, and actually the same weirdly for Robin Tunney. I guess she's the female version because she'd kind of done The Craft not that far before this, and I think she was doing End of Days with Arnie at the same time as this. So she was again like, I guess, a Nick girl who not that Chris O'Donnell was a Nick girl, but yeah, she was the same kind of thing. I think she was like, oh, she's hot doing everything.
Yeah, it was kind of this like weird, inexplicable thing where, kind of like with pop music, right? Of like X artist exists, now you're going to hear X artist wherever you go, and you have no reason you have no understanding of how this became a thing. Like it just is.
Basically, sell as much as you can until the public gets fed up with it. Really.
Yeah, until people like actively are like, we don't want to see Chris O'Donnell anymore. Please stop. Which they vote with their wallets, and sadly for Chris O'Donnell, who I think is a perfectly good actor, but maybe was not quite the leading man that they thought he was.
Yeah.
He he's now on TV. He's doing very well as like a CSI star or whatever. But
seems a good fit. Well, it's the same as it actually kind of reminds me of Matthew Lillard as well, who wasn't really pushed as an A-lister. He was always like the crazy sidekick after Scream.
Mm-hmm.
But like same thing. I mean, like you couldn't throw a rock and not hit him for a while at the end of the 90s in a film,
And now he can't get work. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I've heard him like basically bemoaning his career at this point, but he which was crazy because he was in the Twin Peaks reboot about 5 years ago and was phenomenal. Like he was so freaking good given, a David Lynch script, but he understood what the job was and absolutely nailed it. So I always hope the best for, any actor, but but you do end up becoming a little resentful at some point too of like, who decided every movie that comes out is going to have like Jesse Eisenberg in it or Chris O'Donnell? I don't care to see those guys for 2 hours straight.
Jesse Eisenberg's mother, probably.
Yeah. Mrs. Eisenberg loves that idea.
Well, yeah, and I guess like those two young pert lovelies are in the middle of the film, and around them we have all these like character actors doing various amounts of chewage of scenery. Eating the whole mountain when it comes to Scott Glenn, I think. He's basically Quint. He's playing Quint.
Yeah.
I'll kill your mountain for you, but it ain't gonna be cheap.
You have Bill Paxton as the Texas billionaire who is he's an airline owner, I guess. I think there's a lot of things that are based loosely on real things in this movie, not least of which is the overall plot of this.
Mountain climbing. It's a real thing.
So it's important to note this movie is about Bill Paxton is a billionaire who likes to do daring things because it helps his profile or whatever. He kind of course cheats because you can't trust a billionaire.
No,
and he's
going to get a failed expedition where people have died, and he managed to survive.
And now
he's a murderer, basically.
Yeah. So he wants to go to the top of K2, the second tallest mountain in the world, and he will be waving to the newest plane in his fleet for his airline as it flies over. He's having Robin Tunney, who is
I feel like why didn't he just send up a mount? I'll just say in my office, send a mountaineer dressed like me, filmed it, and then gone, there you go, that'll do.
yeah.
There'll be another difference.
So Robin Tunney is playing a now on the cover of Sports Illustrated mountaineer
Uh,
who is going to lead him up, and so she's a bit of a celebrity. It's like going up to the top of the mountain with like an Olympic athlete or something, I guess. And he's turning it all into a big party. Chris O'Donnell plays Robin Tunney's brother. The movie starts with them having a mountain climbing accident.
yeah,
In
which
which
is well done. I think that's very well done. That kind of
you and I are going to have to agree to disagree on that. But
oh,
and this is why I told Simon before we started recording, I'm going to approach this movie from a
this is why I can't take you to see any Sylvester Stallone films.
but the a pre-Google film of in a movie made in an era before you could just look up how does that actually work, because that seemed wrong. And so anyway, they had been climbing a mountain and things go sideways and they are then dangling from a rope. It's Chris O'Donnell, or it's Robin Tunney is pinned to the wall. Then the rope leads down to Chris O'Donnell, who in turn is tied to their father, who is hanging below him.
His
Father cuts the rope, falls to his death in order to save the kids. It is unclear from the film, A, how that helped, and B, how they actually got down after that. But there's a lot of that in this movie. So
yeah, I will say that I agree with that. The fact that okay, so there's less weight on the rope now, but they're still kind of in the same position.
yeah, nothing has changed.
I guess they could climb up the rope without it giving way easier. I don't know.
I will say now those ropes can hold up to 5,000 pounds.
Oh well.
And they were
but they're not worried about the rope though, are they? They're worried about the clasp in the rock, aren't they?
Yeah, those can hold up to 3,000 pounds.
But what if it doesn't?
You're screwed. But anyway, so the Chris O'Donnell has not climbed a mountain since, but he has become a photographer.
Putting his hair out there.
Yeah, he's become a photographer for National Geographic, apparently specializing in snow leopards on the side of the Himalayas.
I just want to add one thing that made me laugh this time, which I never really appreciated as much before. So he's got an assistant who he kind of like doesn't seem to have a very good relationship with because he doesn't really talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so his assistant does this hilarious kind of accident where he kind of trips, falls down, gets his leg stuck between two rocks, and then kind of like almost like break dances and kind of breaks his leg quite nastily. And I mean, that in itself is kind of quite amusing. But then, like, Chris O'Donnell takes him back in the helicopter, just kind of dumps him in the hospital, doesn't say anything, and just walks off. And I'm like, he obviously doesn't have a very good, much respect or doesn't like this guy very much. Because it's not like he's like, is he okay? Are you okay, Jeff? Or anything. It's just like, fucking idiot. There.
It kind of sets the tone for a lot of the rest of the film. It's
like, I gotta get on with the plot. I gotta go see my sister over there. You're finished now. Your bit's finished. Bye.
Yeah, it's this absolutely I think it's set there to let us know, like, being in the mountains is dangerous. You can get gravely injured at any time, which it's like, yeah, it's mountains. Like, you don't need to sell me on that idea, but nonetheless, that I think that's the point there. But he runs into his sister, who's part of this expedition to go up the mountain, and
she hasn't really forgiven him, has she? She's still like upset over him cutting Dad loose.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of guilt. She's got a lot of anger, and
which I thought was a bit unfair because I'm like, the dad was definitely like the one pushing for that. It's like he was like, "Sorry, Dad, I'm gonna have to let you go." The dad was like, "We're all gonna die. Cut the rope. We're all gonna die."
Yeah, and again, not clear on how anyway. But he and they show him
Epic
hit the
scene.
ground in a disturbing slash hilarious scene of the dad, slapping the earth as he falls into frame like a wet bag of cement.
Which I think would be so. Cliffhanger's version of that was the girlfriend, Michael Rooker's girlfriend, who fell off, had a teddy bear. So they just had the teddy bear bounce, hit the
Mhm.
ground and bounce, which kind of I think works better because I feel like with the dad it would have been a lot messier in real life. He'd
Oh,
have
he
probably
would have exploded like a bag of blood. Yeah.
yeah, and bones sticking out and stuff.
Yeah.
I
They kind of
want
do
to
this
I want
sound.
that version.
Yeah. So anyway, she goes up they have a big party at base camp, and then the sister and Bill Paxton, and Bill Paxton's confronted by Scott Glenn at the party of some
Yeah,
big, like, you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna get people killed again, blah blah blah.
yeah.
So the wise man of the mountain who doesn't wear any like modern climbing gear. He looks like he's dressed like a 19th century Sherpa. So he's one of the earth.
It's kind of Scott Glenn just being Scott Glenn, really.
They clearly just like that's what he was wearing when he walked.
Having seen enough Scott Glenn films, I'm pretty much sure he might not even be wearing any costume though. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, they go up the mountain, blah blah blah, and they despite the fact, I mean, it's a
Well,
little.
let's also remember we kind of meet our colorful
Oh,
characters.
right. It's a 90s movie made in 2000, but it nonetheless it has to do the 90s thing of here's all the quirky characters we're going to meet.
Here's the wacky people who are going to get blown up later, unceremoniously.
Would you like to introduce our wacky band of heroes?
Well, I think I know Americans will probably go, it's too funny English people, but it isn't. They're fucking Australian. There's two Australian brothers who are obsessed with obviously sex and booze, and very inappropriate. Would get cancelled instantly now, straight away. And then there's the doctor from is it the doctor from Star Trek?
It is, yeah.
Um,
And he was
Dr.
in
Bashir.
the Rona Mitra movie we watched.
Yeah, Dr. Bashir, who him and his brother are like very nice, kind of I guess Indian kind of brothers, climbers, guides. And then there's like Chip, who I think is the kind of like I think he might be an Aussie as well, but he's like the base coordinator guy who's going bankrupt, and he's got a French Canadian, incredibly cute model girlfriend who hates everybody and smokes a lot. And am I missing anybody?
I think that more or less covers it. One of the Australians has gone on to great success. It's Ben Mendelsohn.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Oh my god, that
it's a
is
movie
so
based
he's in
on
Star Wars.
yeah.
I totally didn't recognize him.
I know who you're not remembering. Boba Fett himself is in this as the pilot wearing a mustache.
I was kicking myself because I'm like, I know that voice, and of course it's Stormtroopers and Boba Fett, isn't it?
Mhm.
So yeah, Django Fett.
Well, he's also Boba Fett in the
That's
TV.
well, actually, he is now, isn't he? Now he's
Yeah.
fan old, like us.
He's all the Fett. And he's all the clones. He's a very employed actor as long as Star Wars exists.
So he's the pilot, and I guess and his boss is in charge of kind of patrolling or watching the Pakistani Indian border.
Yeah.
Where they've got guns set up, and also luckily have a hut full of very unstable nitroglycerin.
That they keep in leaky containers.
Just because they want a bit of fun. They like to live dangerously.
Uh, yeah.
Which is a total rip-off of Sorcerer, by the way. Because when I was watching this, I was like, basically they nicked a bit of everything. They nicked a bit of Cliffhanger. They nicked a bit of Wages of Fear or Sorcerer. Because Sorcerer, which we definitely need to do as a podcast, I want to do that, is about a bunch of guys all down on their luck, all on the run from the police, whatever, all from the mob, who basically get a job where they can get enough money to buy their way out of this hellhole in the Amazon by driving these trucks hundreds of miles to put out an oil well that's on fire with nitroglycerine. But the catch is they're carrying the nitroglycerine in the back of these trucks. If they go over a pothole or bump, it could go off at any point. And of course, these roads are terrible and sometimes don't even exist. So yeah, so basically they do exactly the same fucking shot, even where he gets on his shoe, and then they go outside and they go, "Don't breathe," and then they throw the shoe and the shoe blows up, just to show you how bad it could be if you had two shoes worth of nitroglycerin,
It's
even a Wellington boost worth of nitroglycerin.
anyway. So yeah, they go up and you know they're not doing this to the best of their ability. Like they know what the weather reports are going to be as they're going up the mountain, and they know like we have like an 85% chance of this going well.
Yeah,
And this is where you get into the whole Googleable aspect of this, because this movie came out hot on the heels of an actual incident in the mid 90s where a bunch of Americans and other people were going up Mount Everest, and the weather turned on them, and very few of them came back. One of them they kept giving up on, thinking he was dead, and then he kept living. He's still doing fine. He is from Texas, which is I think why they pulled Bill Paxton, based his character, made him Texan. This guy was totally like this middle class dude who like just had gotten somehow into mountain climbing. And I think they also based Bill Paxton on the owner of Southwest Airlines, who was this famously braggadocio kind of guy.
yeah,
He's since passed. His name was Herb. And it was at the time, this was in the kind of zeitgeist because of the book Into Thin Air that kind of documented what had happened. And it feels like they definitely tried to do some of that, completely ignoring that at this point, Americans are more aware of how climbing something like this mountain works than they've ever been at any time in history.
yeah.
Because it's been on 2020, it's been on 60 Minutes. Like this has been like we're all finding out like what it actually means to climb Mount Everest. And this movie then takes all that information we now know, goes, never mind, we're going to just ignore reality completely, even though we're basing this. It's not a science fiction movie. It's not a fantasy movie. And this is where I get into the like pre-Google movies of this happened a lot of they're going to concept.
When this came out, yeah, we wouldn't have had internet and we'd barely have had phones. So do you think people would have been that aware? Because I mean, I can tell when this goes from like, kind of like, you know, when they first got the mountain, you know, Bill Paxton's like, you're the guide, you're the guy in charge, I'm going to listen to you. And like you said, they have 85%, you know, fair weather. And then, of course, when it starts to change, you see Bill Paxton just kind of pressing him and like, come on, let's just try to get to that ridge and stuff. And then, of course, it suddenly switches into like stupid, you know, movie, kind of like, you know, or everything's thrown up into the air and like none of this makes any sense anymore. But I mean, I thought, you know, to a certain extent, until it kind of switched, I was like, I can kind of get that. I can get this millionaire guy kind of pushing and like, go, no, look, you know, you work for me. Ultimately.
That's the kind of stuff that I actually think works in the film. Like, I completely was impressed with that part of the script in Bill Paxton in those scenes, because that's kind of the sorts of sociopaths you usually have running major corporations, right? They get to where they're at because they're very convincing, and they get people to think that things are their ideas, and they're like, no, you know, if you just do this thing that is totally not good for you, you know, we're gonna all share in glory together, and that was the stuff I thought was fine. The stuff that I thought was ridiculous was like, look, when you go to climb Mount Everest, it's like a 3-month affair. Yeah. Like you don't just go to Everest
during the day
to the top. Yeah, it's not even that you're like moving back and forth a whole bunch. You have to get acclimated to the various altitudes. It's like saying you're going to go up to the height of where an airplane flies in one day. Like you clearly your body can't do that. So there's essentially 4 camps at Everest that you basically go up to one, stay there for a week, go back down, go up to the next camp, stay there for a week, come back and then you have to keep doing this. The final ascent then is it's all brutal, but you're basically staying in tents in the ice for like weeks and weeks and months. And so obviously usually only rich people can afford to go do it, or people who have just completely blown all their savings to go do this once in a lifetime thing. But it's also deeply, deeply dangerous. You really, really, the idea that you would even haul glass and liquor up the side of a mountain to go have but that you would want to consume alcohol on the side of a mountain as your body's trying to adjust the morning before you leave.
Oh, even the party, yeah.
So it's all that kind of stuff that when you're watching the movie, like, I've never climbed a mountain. I basically live at sea level.
Well, I totally agree with you.
This is complete bullshit.
I do totally agree with you in the fact that, they do seem like they're literally just going for a walk, like a hike for the day. And the fact that later on it takes, like, Scott Glenn and Chris Hemsworth so long to kind of get to them. Chris O'Donnell, rather. Yeah. So long to kind of get to them because they're so far away, we got to cover. I'm like, well, how are they so far away? Because I feel like they've only been walking for like a morning.
Yeah, and at that,
but then are they chop it up? Do we not see that bit? Because I guess they're chop it up as well originally.
I don't know if they were.
So we probably got a much edited version of Bill Paxton's kind of like a expedition, really.
I mean, it's an expedition that should have been going on for weeks and weeks by the time Chris O'Donnell shows up. Yeah, and it's.
He's like, we'll be back for tea.
Yeah, I mean, tea time. It's a really strange movie, and so they're also like, famously, when you go up to the top of the Himalayas, you have to bring oxygen. You're completely covered head to toe because you're in like -0 temperatures. Yeah. This movie has Scott Glenn walking around with a pair of goggles and no mittens. I mean,
he's got any fingers left though. Doesn't care.
Well, they show an actual foot with no toes. That is from a climber who lost his toes in an actual frostbite incident. And then, they cut to Scott Glenn curling his toes under his foot. But it's just crazy. It's like there is a fascinating movie in here somewhere, but someone was like got impatient.
Well, also, are you looking at it like, because remember at the end of the day, it is a stupid action film.
Yes.
So we're not going for docu-realism here. It's like, because a bit that made me laugh was when they take him up in the choppers.
Oh God!
And he's like, I can't get any higher. You got to jump. And I'm like, well, it's lucky that the ledge is exactly parallel to where the chopper can't go any higher, instead of like slightly above it, which would have none of them would have been able to get out. But also, like, I'm sure you can't do that anyway. I'm sure, like, if it gets that close to a chopper, like, basically like shorting out, you need to be like, no, I'm going to have to drop you further down. This ledge won't work for me because we're all going to die, basically. And then they and then I think one of them, I think it's like Chris Hemsworth, obviously, kind of like just ends up like swinging backwards and forwards on the chopper's leg for about 5 minutes.
I kept wondering if that whole sequence wasn't put in after the movie was basically in rough cut. Like they realized
more action.
Yeah, it needed more action somehow, and because the set looks like shit.
Yeah.
It's the one time you're watching the movie and you're going, well, these are completely obviously potato flakes. Like, This is clearly a set. That helicopter's clearly on a rope being swung around.
Yeah.
Because no helicopter could actually do what that helicopter's doing and not just crash. And
I like where the propeller chases the girl as well.
It's like the propellers come to life and trying to kill this one poor woman.
Get her.
And there's no reason for it. They could have gone, you know what? Yeah, let's go like 100 yards further down and drop us off there so we don't all die.
So I would have done.
It doesn't make any sense. So, and if nothing else, this movie posits the idea. So one of the things about mountain climbing that like Into Thin Air made like really clear to people was there's nobody coming for you if you go,
Yeah,
like if you go up a mountain, you're, no matter what you do with your Sherpa, no matter what you do to try and prepare for it, if something happens, you literally will die on the side
yeah,
of Mount Everest, and your body will be there for other people to see forever because no one can afford to pick up 180 pounds of human and carry them back down the mountain. Like that shit just isn't happening. So
yeah.
literally now, as people are going on their vacations for weeks to go climb Mount Everest, they're walking past the corpses of people just like them.
That's freaky. That's
Oh, it's
freaky.
completely, it's a horror show,
Yeah,
but people still go do it, and this movie posits the idea, via money, that otherwise perfectly responsible mountain climbers are going to climb the mountain with the idea of going for a rescue, which is just not a thing that happens. And
I mean, I will say, they at least kind of say, they at least kind of like show the other side of that. I think where they kind of say, well, they're already dead. There's no point. They're going to be dead by the time we get to them. And
yeah,
then, they have to start offering, millions of dollars to like, we'll pay you this if you go. Although I feel like, a lot of them just go just for shits and giggles anyway. It's like, I think it's only the last person who gets $1 million or something.
yeah, it was a profoundly strange setup for the entire film. And again, I don't know anything about mountaineering. It's
Yeah.
like watching this going, wait, they know there's like people up on the mountain. They know what the agreement is, and they're going up into bad weather and bad circumstances that will surely kill them.
Mm.
And it's a strange movie in a way that I very much remember movies of the 90s doing this kind of stuff over and over, of having these setups that they're like, well, it's not exciting enough, so just change reality. And
Yeah.
it's just a movie always seemed to kind of be the attitude.
Well, it's a little bit like Armageddon, isn't it? Kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's like rather than like, I mean, what do they do in Armageddon? They actually drill to blow up to
yeah,
blow up the bits of asteroid or to blow the asteroid up. And I can't remember now, but somebody said, well, the logical thing would actually to do this instead, to actually like, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't fly up to something, even if you could, to do that, because it doesn't make any sense. So yeah. So they're making it more cinematic, I guess, or exciting. Um, Hence, like they're stuck down a crevasse. So how are we going to get them out of the crevasse? We're going to blow it up
yeah.
without starting an avalanche. Only time in the film it doesn't start an avalanche.
It's yeah. I had many questions. So if you're remembering the movie from 20 years ago or whatever, but so during the weather incident, Robin Tunney basically falls into a crevasse, and which ends up saving her.
Very nicely decorated crevasse, very like quite luxurious crevasse, I thought.
A very well lit crevasse. Like that thing is just got the softest, nicest lighting. And Bill Paxton is also down there, and the guy who played Crichton on X-Files is down there, who is, although Robin Tunney is there, and this is the whole thing. One other thing I don't understand. She's brought as the climb lead, but they keep referring to this other guy who they brought along so he can be the sap who gets talked into shit. So I was like, well, why is Robin Tunney even there
Yeah,
if this guy is there? So Robin Tunney essentially
looks nice. Are you allowed to say that?
absolutely go nuts. We're not doing that on the podcast. So so she basically is there as the MacGuffin for Chris O'Donnell to go upon his mission, but she's supposed to be this heroic, awesome climber, but she doesn't climb anything. She doesn't.
No, she don't actually do anything. And it's funny because, like, at the start, when it's her and her dad, and Chris O'Donnell, she's obviously the weakest climber out of the three of them. So I'm like, how did she manage to Did she really improve? Like, my dad's died, so I'm going to become the best climber ever in the next 3 years or whatever.
Famous enough that she's on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Well, hey, maybe it's a critique of the times. Maybe it's saying there were hardly any women climbers, so so she stood out.
I mean, I think that there's probably an argument there for that. But yeah, I'm just saying that's not really what Sports Illustrated covers, but but
Well,
yeah.
they're down this crevasse. The main,
which, by the way, reseals.
yeah. Well, there's kind of an avalanche behind them, isn't there? So I kind of, I'll go with that.
Well, I don't know how they wouldn't have completely gotten covered in snow and ice themselves inside the crevasse once the avalanche happens. A hole's a hole.
Yeah, but I think I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. But I'm thinking if it's moving enough and the bits are big enough, I can see it kind of still sealing it. I mean, it's still very well lit, like you said, because it doesn't go black. But yeah, I mean, I can kind of see maybe the top sealing up, but that'd still be okay down the bottom.
I mean, I'll accept it because it's what happens in the film. It's I don't get it. They're in a cave now. Like when I was watching the film, I was literally confused as to how there was now a roof over the crevasse.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the film, then the way they let people know where they are.
That's great. That's great.
Please, I want to hear your description of what they do.
So the poor old team leader, or one of them, because there's about 5 team leaders, I think. The one that dies because he didn't listen to his own instincts and followed Bill Paxton's dodgy advice. So he gets killed by Bill Paxton because he injects him with the syringe filled with air. And then they go, well, how are they going to spot us once they get here? Because we're kind of like, it's all snow up the top that looks the same. So they kind of like fill. So Bill Paxton cuts him open, fills a plastic bag, I guess full of his guts, which I can kind of work out how they managed to get that much blood in the bag. Because I'm like, how would you do that? Because wouldn't he be frozen as well? But then they kind of shoot it up a rope, and it pops out the top onto the ground and blows up. I guess they have a flare attached to it as well, or something, I don't know. But it's like very elaborate. I'm like, they have all this time to do this with their remaining energy.
It's
going to look really bad. It's going to look really bad when people find them as well. It's like it's like we massacred this guy and decorate for ourselves with him.
It's they fill a gallon bag with blood and guts.
I don't think, unless they tipped him upside down, I don't see how that would work myself.
And then when they do the explosion, it's at least 20 gallons worth of stuff that they spray everywhere.
It's impressive.
It's so much fun. But
it's just to show Bill Paxton's a cad and a rotter, basically.
But the funny thing is, I mean, okay, so the Crichton guy who blood they use, I get he has like a hole in his side. He's not climbing up anything.
No, I mean he is going to die there. I will say that.
But they've already demonstrated that apparently Robin Tunney's like the world's best climber, and this movie also has 2 different definitions of climbing that it conflates, and it never gets brought up in the film, which is it's one thing to like scale the side of a sheer rock face, which is what they're doing at the beginning. It's a completely different skill set to basically Sherpa up a mountain.
Yeah,
those are not the same thing. It's I mean, I'm sure people do both, but you don't, when you're going up the Himalayas, I don't believe they're ever climbing up sheer rock faces. That seems.
Well, what made me laugh as well was like Scott Glenn's obviously, like a goat. You can do anything. Looks a bit like a goat as well. And, but then like the other teams, there's 3 teams of 2. So 2, 4, 6. And he's like, well, I'm going to put a strong climber with a weaker climber. And I'm like, well, some of these guys seem really bad. Like the woman, the French Canadian woman, she doesn't she say I'm a terrible climber? I don't know if she's joking, but then like, and the brothers, I guess they're not too bad, the Aussie brothers. But then, yeah, I'm like, these guys really shouldn't be doing this anyway. Like some of them,
Yeah.
'cause this is like the hardest climb ever, and it's like you and me basically doing a downhill ski run on the hardest course ever when we've taken a couple of lessons. Basically, I'm hoping for the best.
It's yeah, it's really strange. One of the big threats in the film is that
I mean, even Chris O'Donnell, he hasn't climbed for 5 years or something. I guess.
it's been 3. Yeah, he hadn't done anything in 3 years. He's taking photos, hiding out in huts with his guy he doesn't like.
Guy with his broken legs.
Um, so the big threat, aside from the fact that the guy has a hole in his side, is that if they stay up there too long, they'll get air sickness or something. Of
Your lungs start freezing and fluid starts gathering in your lungs, and
Yeah, that's not a thing.
this whole thing.
No, that's not. You can die on the side of a mountain, but you don't if you. I mean, it's part of why you acclimate, um, but that what
That's
they
scary.
described is a real condition with the name for it, but that is not what the condition is.
Okay.
Um, so again, in a Googleable future, that's easy enough to look up. But yeah, basically the entire like ticking clock threat they added to the film of you've only got 22 hours, and drinking water doesn't help if your lungs are already filling with fluid. It's not how that works. So there's this big threat that there's no water, even though they're in an ice cave and would probably just chip off ice and put it in their mouths.
Well, they do. They do, actually, to give them credit, they do that for a while, but then they say they've run out of the heater things to melt the ice. I think.
Yeah, but your body's still more than freezing temperature. You can still put ice in your mouth.
I don't know. Should you do that though? If you're kind of like you're freezing,
I don't know. I think it's better than the alternative, which is apparently in this
slushies all around.
feeling.
Slushies on me.
Yeah. So it's a peculiar film in a lot of ways. They break up for reasons into 3 different climbing teams to find the missing people.
Some more people can get killed.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that line in Ghostbusters, who goes, "Let's split up so we can do more damage."
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a little baffling as to there's no reason given. They're like well, let's see who can reach them fastest, is I think what they say. And I'm like, well, isn't the line from A to B like the fastest? Aren't you guys just possibly all going to lose each other and
yeah.
not be able to help each other, which is exactly what happens.
But they also realize halfway up that the sunlight, which I'm not sure why they didn't realize it's a base camp, but because you'd have thought, how long's that nitroglycerin been sitting inside that hut with a roof window? But apparently sunlight sets it off. Because it finally blows up at base camp and scares blows away the teacup, rudely interrupts the tea break of the commander, the Indian commander, and so yeah, they all start frantically trying to like bury their backpacks, and that leads to all kinds of fun and slapstick.
Well, it leads to there's a whole storyline between one climber who's Muslim and then Ben Mendelsohn, who's one of the fun guy climbers.
The Aussies,
Yeah, and
which is quite a nice little relationship, but then they get in probably the worst CGI, they get blown away very quickly for no reason.
so I will say I also was like looking online for stuff about this movie, and you can see their skeletons if you freeze frame it as they get blown up.
You can.
Yeah.
Because I try to slow it down,
Uh,
and it's just like it's almost like somebody just threw red paint
yeah.
at the film, so it just went splat.
Yeah. I was in shock that they didn't pop up at the end of the third reel. Like I thought they were gonna have their like heroic return of like, oh, they got knocked away from the explosion, but we've spent all this time showing how these 2 characters came to understand each other and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Not, but now that part of the story is done, and so we're going to murder them. Where this movie is going to murder them.
Well, again, I feel like maybe I'm giving Martin Campbell too much credit, but I feel like again that's very similar to Sorcerer, where in Sorcerer, yeah, a couple of the characters start bonding, and then they go over a pothole, and yeah, the truck just blows up. It's just this random fate, kind of.
I think I accepted it more in Sorcerer because of the relentlessly bleak tone of the film.
Yeah,
This film feels like something you'd go see at 2 o'clock on a Saturday.
yeah,
That was what was showing, and it was, you wanted to get out of the house. Like, this is that movie. This doesn't Sorcerer is a movie that has artistic aspirations and like themes, and
yeah,
this movie when they got blown, I was like, oh, okay, they have this interesting thing of like the party guy Australians coming to respect this other guy, and he's coming to respect his POV. I don't think he's going to become a Muslim at the end, but they're going to be pals, and they've come to an agreement, and it feels like it's going that way, and then it's like,
yeah,
boom. Sorry we spent all this time on these characters. They're dead now.
Yeah. So yeah, so I kind of like trying to think what else we could talk about actually. So what do you think about the ending?
It's completely sociopathic.
I mean, it's a nice link up to the start, though, I guess.
Oh, yeah, okay, that part of the ending. I thought you meant like the epilogue.
I like how. Well, I liked how Scott Glenn actually is gonna kill him,
Uh-huh.
and then I guess like thinks better of it. But then, of course, they put him straight away. They put him in a position where he kind of has to kill him anyway to like save everybody else. And he does a little smile. He's like, "Oh, okay, it's gonna work out. It's worked out always, basically."
Yeah.
Now I get an excuse to be heroic and kill Bill Paxton.
Yeah. No, for as far as like,
although this time there's 7 people dangling on the road, held by a very small French Canadian woman at the top.
Yeah, there's some nice narrative symmetry. I don't know, and this is where you would get into trouble with these movies in this period of they wanted so badly to do a thing in the film that was how things would end up. I did see a thing from a mountain climber talking about this film a bit, and they were mentioning
that's hilarious.
She uses her axes, I guess, to hold the rope up.
Yeah.
And they're like, but you can literally see the tools she would use to hold the rope down hanging off of her belt. Like that's what those tools are that are dangling from there. They're like, she could, in like 2 seconds, she could have pinned that rope down and it would have been 100% secure. Like, you would never do this with an axe. But we also haven't talked about Chris O'Donnell leaping from one mountain to the other, which was the big money shot for the trailer.
That was, and that's actually again very weirdly very Stallone, because Stallone for a while in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I think he had in his contract that he had to like run at the camera going oh in slow motion while shit blew up behind him.
Yes,
and I think in Cliffhanger he does on a rope bridge, doesn't he? He has to run over the rope bridge faster than the rope bridge blows up and falls down. But I guess Chris O'Donnell kind of like is trying to one up that by he doesn't need a bridge. He's going to jump. He's going to jump about half a mile and then land like Wile E. Coyote on the side of a rock and be fine, I guess.
Which raised the question for me of how does the next person get over, and then how are they getting back?
That's true. Well, that's a good point. I have no idea. I was going to throw a rope, but then it's far too far away.
He has a rope attached to him. Should that happen, what's he miss and the axes don't work and he doesn't stick into the side of the other mountain like a fly.
Yeah.
He's going to swing down and shatter every bone in his body.
Yeah.
as he swings back and smacks into that mountain and then just dangles there.
Yeah.
It's a
Well, also,
yeah.
it looks impressive. I mean, I think you'd probably die, but well, you definitely would die. But also, how long would it take him to climb up to the top once he's there? Because he seemed to be an awful lot way down a very big mountain on the other side.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they just pop up. Everybody pops up at the same time, conveniently. Like Glenn pops up. Hey, I'll stop your axe coming out when you're not using your rope things for some reason. And then the French Canadian woman, she pops up, even though she's a rubbish climber. She's like, I jumped over as well, but they didn't film me doing
No, no, which would have been even more impressive in a lot of ways. But it, yeah, and so they do escape they're all basically dangling inside the crevasse as they're trying to save the sister and anybody in it. And
Yeah.
Scott Glenn and Bill Paxton fall to their deaths, and so they've sealed up their circulation because you find out Bill Paxton had used up all the medication that will stop your lungs from filling up with fluid,
which he did previously with Scott Glenn's wife on the previous expedition.
Yeah, and the perfectly preserved wife on the side of the mountain, which is their one nod to that this shit will actually happen. But she's like sitting up, like she's like a Disney animatronic. That
Yes, yeah. She's gonna start singing.
And that's where you realize Scott Glenn's up the side of K2, almost to the top, and not wearing gloves. And I was like, wait a minute. It's kind of one thing that their faces are uncovered. You need to be able to show the actors, but you can at least have him wearing gloves or mittens. He can take off a glove to put the ring on. But that's when I realized his hands are never covered in the course of this movie.
Well, I remember them saying that with the Thing prequel when that came out, because I don't know if you remember, but like the original John Carpenter, The Thing, every time they went outside, it looked cold. It was freezing. Yeah. And they had to put on their hoods and stuff. To the point where you couldn't tell who was who when they were standing around talking, which was probably the point. And then when they did the prequel, they had, I think Joe Edgerton and people just like sitting around smoking cigarettes outside. Like, it's a lovely morning in Antarctica. Just having my cup of coffee before I start work. It's like, you'd be having frostbite, wouldn't you? When your nose fall off in a minute. So, yeah. So I think, it's definitely if you take it seriously or not, the conditions, like as a director and a filmmaker.
Yeah, and I don't know, Martin Campbell.
But having said that, I guess we can talk about Martin Campbell a little bit because this was directed by Martin Campbell.
That's what I was about to go. Is like, and let's talk about his filmography. So
yeah, because he's actually, I feel like he's a bit like Tony Scott for me. He's like, obviously we have our favorite directors, and I think for guys our age, you got your Spielberg. Obviously, you got to have your Spielberg in there. Don't go anywhere without packing your Spielberg. But then there's also, kind of like Chris Nolan and all the big hitters, Denis Villeneuve. But then you kind of forget about the little guys who actually probably entertain you a huge amount. And, for me, definitely Tony Scott. Don't think he's really made a film I don't like. Although Beverly Hills Cop 2 came pretty close. And, but like, I would say Martin Campbell. I mean, Martin Campbell, apart from the fact that he's very impressively relaunched Bond twice with different actors, with GoldenEye and Casino Royale. He's done the Zorros. He's done The Foreigner with Jackie Chan. He actually, even like when I went on the plane to England like last year, I saw there was like a Liam Neeson action film, and I went, oh my god, like about the 800th and 57th Liam Neeson action film. But I started watching it because I just wanted something like, flickering. And it actually turned out to be a lot better than I thought because Martin Campbell directed it. And it actually had like, stuff going on and character work. And, the thought about the narrative and it had some twists. And I'm like, this is like, I mean, it sounds like damning faint praise to call him workmanlike, but here's a dude who turns up and makes sure that every aspect of a film works as well as it can. And I'm not going to blame him for like, vertical limit because, he's not in control of the script. I mean, I'm sure he can try to change the script, but ultimately he doesn't do the script. But I think, it probably is as good as it is because of what he's put into it. He's, I think he's a very, very solid director, very, very unappreciated director. And I would totally love it if the Bond producers gave him a truckload of money and asked him to come back and try to relaunch another Bond, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his IMDb entry right now. Unfortunately, I associated him so strongly with in my head. There's two Martin Campbells. Let me put it that way.
You're going to say Green Lantern.
Yeah, of course. Like there's
I would say Green Lantern was probably out of his hands. I think that's a lot of studio interference and shit.
And I'm wondering now if that's when he has trouble. Like he just like raises his hands and goes, "Forget it. I'm just going to get through this job." Like when that occurs, and it's entirely possible that happened with this film.
Yeah,
because I agree. He made like Mask of Zorro straight up. Great film. Love it. Good action movie. If I had a 10-year-old child, I would make them watch Mask of Zorro with me.
Respect to Anthony Hopkins' stunt double in that. Jumping on horses from great heights and stuff.
That he did all that himself. Legend of Zorro, maybe not as great. Don't really blame him for it. But
I think script.
Yeah, and I think the studio had some very specific ideas of what they wanted the film to be, and maybe that was not going to ever work. But he did the best he could with what he had. But GoldenEye, clearly a fun movie, good Bond.
Yeah. And people didn't like Bond like GoldenEye, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, Casino Royale is
fantastic.
I was going to say my first or second favorite Bond. Like I'm not. Yeah. It's in my top 3 easily.
And such a different kind of Bond, but still a really successful Bond.
But yeah, he's still out there certainly doing things. And so it does make me wonder, given his clear chops, but also that this feels so much like 90s studio filler that they would just like pump out at you in over the course of any summer. That
I'm sure he has to kind of almost like anybody, like even like actors, unless you get up to like Tom Cruise kind of level, pretty much everybody has to like, I'll be in a Transformers movie if you make me, as long as I can make a little personal film on my own. And I'm sure like directors are the same. It's like, I will do this for you to the best of my ability. I still want it to be good, but I will do this that maybe doesn't interest me so much if you let me go and make this afterwards.
I see he also did Cast a Deadly Spell.
I don't know what that is. What's that?
It's Fred Ward. It's a noir thing with magic in it, like real straight up like wizards and shit. Like,
oh wow.
Yeah, we should totally watch it. It's a trip.
Well, he started off on British TV, and he actually did one of my favorite shows. In fact, I'm going to get it out. This is lost on, sadly, the people listening, but I'm going to get it out.
Oh, The Professionals.
The Professionals, which is basically kind of like our version of Starsky and Hutch, but a bit more Bond orientated. A couple of guys in Ford Capris went around being very un-PC, like leering at girls and punching guys for no reason. For 5 seasons, and he directed lots of episodes of that.
I see he also, and this is maybe a ding on his record, did No Escape.
So you say that? I have a little soft spot for that, because I remember when I first went to college, I actually got a job in the local cinema, and so for a couple of summers I watched all kinds of rubbish. I watched RoboCop 3, Beverly Hills Cop 3, and some good films. But that was one of them. And I was like, I don't mind seeing Ray Liotta running around a semi-futuristic island, getting shots at.
But this is the movie I saw famously. UT would have these screenings they did. I don't know if they were test screenings or just to get word of mouth out. It would always be about a month before a movie was released. And so like that's how I saw Serial Mom and some other stuff. And they did No Escape, but they showed the reels out of order.
It didn't matter.
Someone had just had a tragic death scene, and then the guy pops up, literally looking up over a rock in like the next scene. Everybody went bananas, like absolutely crazy. So I would actually, because I've never seen it since. So I would actually
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, it's a date. Let's do No Escape.
I'm down. I will absolutely watch No Escape to see how that movie was actually supposed to go.
There is no escape from watching No Escape.
Yeah. I think what we figured out is they flipped the third and fourth reels because the fifth reel then picked up with the finale of the movie.
From what I remember, and I haven't seen it for 20 years at least, is Ray Liotta's taking it very seriously. I think his little mate is who kind of gets slapped around and tortured is who's the one from Entourage? The Dylan.
Oh yeah,
Dylan?
Yeah. Matt,
and I think the baddie is incredibly camp man with dreadlocks and a beard, who looks like a wrestler. And it kind of like it really felt like a Mad Max movie with no budget, which is kind of terrifying because Mad Max didn't have any budget really. But it's almost like Christopher Lambert was sick that week, so we got Ray Liotta somehow. We blackmailed Ray Liotta into being it.
Oh, that the truth of that is just astounding. Yeah.
I remember quite enjoying it at the time. So
if you weren't of a certain age so when Cy and I were probably in our early to mid 20s, the guy from Highlander, Christopher Lambert, whatever it is, it would just
do everything.
It was insane. You were constantly at Blockbuster going, he's in Fortress. He's in Fortress 5. He's in like there was just constantly a new Christopher Lambert movie, and then he just disappeared. It was like Kaiser Sosa. He's just like that was it. He did like
pay for the
40 movies in 2 years. And then he was just gone. Like you never heard from him.
Yeah. He's he was up there with the McDowells, and they like I will work for food basically.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna call
Rutger Hauer was the same. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Rutger Hauer showed up on Smallville, this American TV show.
As the janitor. The suspicious janitor.
He was playing like the mob heavy, but I was just like, man, Rutger Hauer, what's going on, my friend? And the funny thing is those guys are podcasting now, and they just every time they mention his name, they just laugh. Clearly, he scared the shit out of everybody on set.
Yeah.
But back to this actual mountain climbing movie, like Chris O'Donnell as the lead is kind of a weird non-entity, which is kind of also how I think of Chris O'Donnell post Scent of a Woman. Like,
I feel like Chris O'Donnell is like the abyss. You stare into it, and it stares back at you. You can project whatever you want onto Chris O'Donnell.
Yeah, he's such a like weird blank slate of an actor in some ways. Like it works for Scent of a Woman because he's doing nothing but reacting to Al Pacino and like, oh, that guy's crazy for like an hour and a half.
You would want two Pacinos. Gotta balance that out.
Even in like the Batman movies, like his dialogue is always just so you can't tell if the dialogue's horrendous or he just doesn't have a grip on it.
From what I vaguely remember, having managed to avoid them for 20 years about the Batman movies, at least the last couple were, I felt like his character was written a lot younger than he was.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like he was 18 or whatever at the time, or 20, and he just sounded like a kind of petulant 12-year-old having a tantrum.
That's entirely possible. I mean, the character in the comics is certainly like 12 or 13 at that point. So I can totally see them doing that, and and that happens with movies from time to time, where you do find out a character who's acting weird was original. Oh, this character was originally supposed to be 13, but we had access to this 23-year-old, so we're not going to do rewrites, but
Yeah.
they fit into the movie. Um, but yeah, in this, it could have been literally anybody. It was such a
Oh, yeah.
strange. And then at the end of the film,
So somebody, I read a review about this. I didn't actually read that many reviews, but one review made me laugh because it said Chris O'Donnell in this is almost so white bread it's painful. It's like he's the whitest middle class guy ever.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and that said, the character has no like real conflicts. He's trying to save his sister. Like that's,
Always, I guess he's getting over his fear of climbing again. I guess he's like
but
trying to
they
get
never
her.
get into it. They never discuss it. He's just like, I guess I'm climbing a mountain again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He doesn't like have a warpy moment or anything. He just gets on with it.
Yeah. Um, it's just not discussed. They want to have the drama, so they've kind of framed both sides of the movie with the dangling sequences, um, and to prove he was right all along to let his father die.
Yeah.
But
See, at the end, he should have gone, told you so.
but both he and Robin Tunney, for being the two central characters, just I mean, and especially in a movie where you have all these character actors, we have Ben Mendelsohn kind of,
Oh, yeah.
whack.
Chewing everything up.
Yeah, and you have Scott Glenn being Scott Glenn, and you have even this good-looking lady with this shady past who they never really clear up, and then at the end of the film, it's like suddenly she's like, "Oh, I'm in love with you" or whatever.
Well, I can understand that either. Was she in love with him, or did she just give him like a kiss and say thank you? Because I'm like,
I didn't
I thought
know.
she,
I went
I
through the
thought she was in love with
journey.
Skip. I thought she was in love with Skip, but he drives her crazy because he doesn't do the books properly. So
Yeah,
I read it for my own peace of mind as like just like a thank you for me not dying kiss. Because otherwise, it don't make any sense. Because they never had any romantic friction, really.
uh,
Yeah,
no, I was very confused by that. Aside from them going, we forgot to show that he was like
he's a
hetero,
man, baby.
through this. Yeah, like he has to get a girl at the end of the film, and this blonde
Yeah,
is standing here, so let's use her.
it's
Like I
either
know
her
stuff.
or it's a frozen when he finds out. He's probably got a better acting range than Chris O'Donnell. She's out acting me, even though she's dead.
But yeah, it's a strange film, and it's utterly been, I think, mostly forgotten. Like it doesn't, and it was not one that ended up like running, at least in the here. But if a
I
movie
was
has
looking
any
at
kind of traction, it ends up on TNT running every weekend for a few years.
I was looking at the box office. Box office wasn't bad. I think it cost 79 million or something, and it made 200 and something.
Holy crap!
Yeah, but I'm the same as you because I don't remember it really even coming out, or like if it did, it came out for a couple of weeks and just disappeared again.
Wow.
But saying that, I feel like I do remember adverts for it on TV.
Oh, I remember that thing of him jumping off the mountain with his dual axe. I'm gonna stick myself to be the human fly thing, like, and going, okay, they're selling you this of like this is going to be full of him like leaping around, and it was unclear who the villain was from the trailer, and but I don't I don't know until you brought it up if I'd known anyone who had seen it. Uh, that said, Stewart worked in many video stores, and he said that was one of the ones he would recommend to people depending on what they, told them they liked. And
Yeah.
they'd come back and say, yeah, they liked it. And I can see like,
Oh
hey,
yeah.
I'm a big Con Air fan. Like I need something to rent this weekend, and well, Vertical Limits, and I can see that linkage there.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it's entertaining. That's why I like it. I mean, it's a total. It's one. I mean, I could even go so far as saying it's a guilty pleasure, maybe, because we were talking about guilty pleasure films.
Yeah.
Um, but then I don't know. Maybe I'm too kind on it, but I'm like, I don't think it should be guilty pleasure. It's just a pleasure.
That's fine, and I think you can always view a movie however it's pleasing to you. I will say what it reminded me of is
Cliffhanger.
what?
Cliffhanger.
Yeah. Well, what it reminded me of watching it was I was starting to get really kind of not into action movies until like there was kind of this period there until like Lord of the Rings came out where I was like, I'm just not interested in going to see that stuff, which was crazy because at that point you're talking about someone who's like a 23-year-old male in the United States. Like whatever was going on with action movies was not landing with me. And and often
Matrixy was a Matrix time.
Yeah, well, yeah, so famously, I don't actually like The Matrix all that much. So
heresy. Burn the heresy.
And fair enough. And I haven't seen it again since, but yeah, it was the you'd go to see a movie and he'd be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like the movie, the people who spent $79 million making this movie cared less than apparently I do about mountain climbing, and they made a $79 million mountain climbing movie. And I
knew less about mountain climbing than you did. I think.
Yeah, it was just a really strange thing to kind of, but also you knew what you were getting into when you went to go see something like Con Air, where you were like, well, this is like a bunch of wacky characters and they're going to have just like keep increasing the set pieces. Like I didn't actually like Con Air all that much, but I got what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I was fine with it. But like I didn't like The Rock when I saw The Rock the first time.
Oh wow.
It just seemed I got, what they were doing. It just didn't feel like it was for me. And just so I was kind of at this point walking away. So it was like really genre pictures that kept me in going to the films, and action films anyway at this point.
You know what's good about this, I think? For me, I think it's the fact that we love 80s action, right? Like Predator and stuff. Problem is in the 90s it became very like wink at the camera, a little bit self-aware, a little bit self-mocking.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a throwback. For better or worse, this isn't self-aware.
Oh, it's painfully unaware of stuff.
It's a little bit retarded. But it's like, and in a way that's kind of refreshing. I mean, especially from not just back then, but like maybe even more so now. Because it's just like, I'm going to take this concept completely seriously. And we're like, but your concept is broken. It's like, I don't care. I'm going to take it completely seriously.
Yeah.
So it's like same as we were talking about Deep Blue Sea. I would say is similar, very similar.
Part of why I want to cover Deep Blue Sea is I've seen that movie
million
times, and I can never tell if it's taking itself seriously or not. I cannot, and that's my.
Well, we can talk about it when we do. Yeah. But
everyone has that to look forward to, is Ryan being baffled by the Intelligent Shark movie.
Could happen. I've been Googling it.
I think it's mostly about Rennie Harlan working his way through his divorce, is what I think.
Yeah, the beautiful lady gets eaten, horribly, but because she did everybody wrong. What does that mean? What does that represent, Rennie? But no, yeah. Well, I tend to put this on every couple of years. I had fun with it this time again. Spotted a couple of like little things I hadn't noticed before. Scott Glenn always makes me chuckle. It's always nice seeing Bill Paxton, being evil. And And like I say, Martin Campbell, I just really like Martin Campbell. I think he doesn't often do me wrong. Um, I think he always tries whatever he's given. I appreciate the fact that he tries to make his best out of it, which a lot of directors don't. A lot of directors, I think, look down on stuff they're given or just lazy.
Mhm.
Almost kind of give away second unit stuff and don't care. But he obviously is somebody who's like, what can I do to make this better? Um, so yeah, and you're right. There's a big vacuum in the middle of this with the actors, but I think there's enough interesting character actors having fun around them that's okay. In fact, you probably even need that to balance it out. You know,
Oh, yeah, yeah. It does definitely have the 90s flavor of like Con Air and these other films of really packing the movie with colorful characters, which in a lot of ways, I feel like that is something that they kind of movies could look at doing again. Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost like I watched John Wick 4 the other day, and I enjoyed it. It's more the same, but I feel like and actually weirdly similar because I guess Keanu does the same thing. He's like he's almost like totally downplays, underplays everything, and he's surrounded by all these characters. But at the same time, even John Wick 4, for its silliness, is very kind of like is taking it too seriously, I think. And it's like so it's nice to go back to a time or film that is actually kind of just having fun, really.
yeah, yeah, and it would be when people talk about the marvelization of movies and whatnot. I do think
Even Marvel, don't you feel like don't you miss the first Iron Man feel compared to now? There's so many parallel universes and things we're trying to remember. It's like I don't care.
that I can't weigh in on because I'm so wired for all that stuff after 40 years of reading comics. Like all of that's just water to me. It doesn't. It's just how the stuff works. But I do think I haven't seen the new Ant-Man yet. But I do enjoy. I would always enjoy the tone of those because they were goofy. Like
Yeah,
as other movies were taking things like super seriously. It's like here's a guy who knows his power is shrinking and growing, and it's going to be very silly. Uh,
yeah,
and
totally.
so but I do think like there's a market for kind of one-off feel good action movies out there that is kind of untapped. You can make two or three of them. I'm not saying they all have to be like one-offs like this, but there's definitely a market for like it was part of why I enjoyed like The Gray Man when I watched it on Netflix. Of this is a movie that is not taking itself seriously. It's giving you spectacle. It's giving you wacky characters. Um, and, but it also looks like they spent $1 billion on this thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, if you've not seen The Gray Man, not everyone loved it, but compared to The Red Line or whatever the thing was with The Rock and Gal Gadot
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
I didn't particularly care for that, but I did like The Gray Man. Uh,
Oh,
but it was also the Russo brothers who did a bunch of Marvel shit, so your mileage may vary. Um,
no, I like them. Yeah, I'll check them out. Yeah, yeah.
uh, but anyway, I'm glad you got me to watch it. And I do think it'll be as we roll into summertime here and start watching movies about angry animals eating people. My favorite topic. Um, I think this is a good way to kind of head into that season with this one.
Totally. Well, that's about it, I guess. We're off to climb Everest. Um, should be back by tea time. Gonna get choppered in.
One thing I'm going to plug real fast is Danny from Superheroes Every Day is launching a podcast soon. I will also say I am the first guest in what will be a 3-hour epic of covering Man of Steel. So look for that to hit. I'll be linking to that and also look at superheroeseveryday.com because Danny will surely be posting those podcasts. But that's a new podcast. It's not me. I'm just a guest. So, but you'll want to jump on board with that podcast and enjoy Danny's insights and wisdom as he takes you through the turning point movies of the superhero world. So,
Excellent. I will
yeah.
check that out.
All right, everybody. We'll come back soon enough with probably shark movies.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Tender babies in your hands, and the old men playing checkers by the trees. MacArthur's Park is melting in the dark, all the sweet green icing flowing down. Someone left the cake out in the rain. I don't think that I can take it, 'cause it took so long to bake it, and I'll never have the recipe again. Oh no.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.